Hi, I'm Andre, and this is Learning to Read Manga in Japanese, a practical guide, part 6. Common roadblocks when reading Japanese, and how to troubleshoot them. So let's say you're reading a manga in Japanese and you get stuck. There's a lot of different roadblocks you can encounter when you're first reading Japanese, and even no matter what level you are. So here are a couple things you can do to troubleshoot. So let's say you're stuck on a sentence. Tip number 1, always read the sentence in its entirety before you start trying to translate it. And that's because Japanese can sometimes feel reversed compared to English, because Japanese is a subject, object, verb sentence structure, whereas English uses a subject, verb, object sentence structure. For example, I ate the apple versus 私はリンゴを食べた. So oftentimes when I'm reading Japanese, because I'm a native English speaker, it sometimes feels like I'm reading the sentence backwards. And I don't understand what the sentence is even trying to say until I finish reading the entire sentence. Another confusing thing about Japanese is that they can use entire sentence clauses to modify a noun. So sometimes you can be reading a Japanese sentence and you feel like you got to the end of it, but then it continues because you actually just read a clause that was modifying a noun. And that's something they actually talk about in chapter 9 of Genki, and the example they give is あそこで本を読んでいる学生はみちこさんです. So あそこで本を読んでいる is already a full sentence, but it's just a modifier for the noun 学生 to say the student who is reading a book over there. Tip number 2, read the sentence or the speech bubble or the panel before the sentence you're stuck on and after a sentence you're stuck on, because Japanese is a language that's super reliant on context. If you don't have the context for the situation, it will be hard to understand the conversation. Constantly in the Japanese language, you'll leave out the subject of the sentence because it's already implied by the situation you're in. Maybe you missed the context from the previous sentence or the previous bubble or the previous panel. Or maybe they're about to explain the context in the next sentence or the next panel or the next bubble. Maybe it's a setup for a joke or something. One thing that's helped me before when I've gone completely stuck on a sentence and I have absolutely no idea what's going on is I try to, piece by piece, define each word in the sentence in order. Then I'll write them all out on a piece of paper and I'll try unscrambling the sentence in English first. Another thing you can do is try parsing the sentence in a different way. Another challenging thing about Japanese is that there are no spaces between words in a sentence. You just have to kind of know where one word ends and the other starts. For example, the first time I encountered the word toうもろこし, I had never seen that word before, and it's such a long word, and it's only in hiragana, so there's no kanji to even give me a hint at how to parse it. So I was looking up toうもろこしin pieces and not getting anything until finally I decided, okay, I'll just type the entire thing in. And guess what? Toうもろこしis one word and it means corn. So that's another tip. Maybe something that you're splitting up into individual words is actually a set phrase, like an idiom or something. Instead of looking up one word at a time, try looking up multiple words from that sentence at a time. Another thing you can do is if you're having trouble looking up a word in the dictionary and you're not getting any results, maybe it's some kind of obscure jargon, maybe it's an idiom that's not in the dictionary, maybe it's some kind of modern slang. Instead of looking it up in the dictionary, you might want to actually look it up on Google. So type in the word on Google in Japanese, and after that type in the word imi, which means meaning. It might take you to a Japanese website explaining the definition in Japanese, of course. Usually you'll get search results from Japanese to Japanese dictionaries such as Weblio, Goo, or Kotobank. You might even get search results from Yahoo Answers Japan or even from other sources. So for example, in one of the manga I was reading, I found the word sekku, which is not a word in the dictionary because it's actually a term from Super Smash Bros. I wouldn't have figured that out if I didn't look it up on Google and found Smash Brothers videos with that word in the title. So look up the word, type in the word imi, it might take you to a Japanese dictionary, and you can just go ahead and try to translate that. And if that scares you, don't worry, because there is a Google Chrome plugin called Rikai-kun, where if you install it and you turn it on, and when you hover over any Japanese text, it'll tell you the definitions of each word. So that should help you out with translating Japanese dictionary explanations. So I also just found out about a plugin called Yomi-chan, which is basically the same as Rikai-kun. You hover over Japanese sentences on the web and it'll translate the words for you. But it has a lot more functions like parsing entire sentences, and it also has a direct link to Anki. But because it's a lot more robust than Rikai-kun, it's also a little more complicated to use. I haven't totally figured it out myself, but that's another option. So that should help you out in translating any Japanese text online, including dictionary explanations that are in Japanese. So another thing you can do, if it's a grammar pattern or a sentence structure that's bugging you, that's you don't understand, you can type in the sentence structure or the sentence and type in bunpo, which means grammar, or you can even just type in grammar in English. And then you can just do the same thing there. Look through the search results, and if the explanation is in Japanese, try to translate it with Rikai-kun. Though for grammar, for a lot of grammar principles, you could probably find an explanation of it in English. Another thing you could do if you're having trouble with a manga is try to find an English translation of that manga. Now, keep in mind that when translators, especially professional translators, translate manga, they're not literally translating the sentence word for word, because they also have to think about interpreting the lines for a Western audience. Sometimes during localization, a line may be changed completely so it makes sense for non-Japanese readers, yet still maintains the spirit of the original. This probably happens the most frequently with puns and jokes based on the Japanese language. For example, in this panel of Dragon Ball, a character mispronounces the kanji in Goku's name as Mago Gosora-san, and obviously that does not really translate to English, so they have to change the joke slightly for the English version. So when you look at English translations in order to help you out, take it with a grain of salt. And if you can't find the English translation of a manga online, if there's an anime, that's another perfect option. You can find an English subtitled version of the anime. Now, if the manga doesn't have an anime adaptation, a final desperate move you can make is to type that sentence into Google Translate. Now, it's notoriously bad at translating, being better at translating individual words than full sentences, but it has gotten better since it first started, and if you use it, it can at least give you a very rough idea of how to translate that sentence. Now, if all else fails, ask somebody for help. If you know somebody who knows Japanese or is fluent in Japanese, if you have a friend, a family member, whoever, ask them for help. Also, if you're taking a Japanese class, don't be afraid to ask your professor. They'll probably be happy that you're working on Japanese outside of their regular classwork or homework. You could also ask for help on a Japanese language forum. For example, Hi Native or the subreddit r/learnjapanese. And finally, if that isn't available to you, and you've tried every single troubleshooting tip that I just gave you, and you're still stuck, just move on. It's more important that you get lots of reading practice than it is to let yourself just get stuck on trying to figure out a difficult sentence for hours. Especially if maybe you don't understand that specific sentence completely, but you do get the gist of the situation and the emotions at that point in the story. Now, the one big roadblock I haven't mentioned yet is how do you deal with kanji when there's no furigana? And that's what I'm going to be discussing in the next video. But thank you so much for watching this video, and have fun.